Hi guys, Allison here, the Bored Housewife. Thank you so much for joining me for another week's episode of the Bored Housewife. If you have been enjoying this content, I would love to hear from you. If you've been enjoying this content, please share with a friend. Again, I would just love to build our community, so I am going to continue to preach that every week. So hope you're okay hearing it. Anyways, but yes, you can also check out in the description. There's a link to take you to my social media pages and my website. You can sign up for the monthly newsletter. I'm still working on what next month, June, what sort of topics I'm going to be talking about. If there's something that you guys will love to hear, please let me know in the comments somewhere. Send an email, and I'll see if I can fit that into next month's topic ideas. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it there. Okay, so last week we talked about resentment and what resentment is. Maybe like I shared my personal experiences of how I found resentment in my life towards my spouse, and just the different odd sort of weird feelings that it can make you have, and odd behaviors that aren't loving, don't feel good. It feels evil, hatred, all that sort of stuff, right? So, I also mentioned how unconditional love is the antidote to resentment, and at least in the sense of your spouse in a relationship, I think unconditional love can really help. Not that there isn't other ways to overcome your resentment, but this is what I personally found helpful for me. And unconditional love, I don't feel like it's talked about enough. I think like we all kind of have an idea of what it is, but I'll be curious to see what your guys' thoughts are after this episode. If were like already in this headspace, if you feel this with your spouse, because I realized in my journey that I wasn't like I had part of this, but not fully all of this sort of love. So I really had some work to do to get to this place. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. Some unconditional love. All right, I am sipping on some iced coffee, so whatever time of day it is for you, whatever beverage this calls for, please grab that. And cheers, guys. Let's have some fun. Before we get into talking about unconditional love as an antidote, I wanted to talk about exactly what it is. When I first came across this term recently, like I've heard it and stuff, but I was reading one of Mark Manson's books, and he had like a whole section talking about unconditional love, and it really hit me differently because I realized I didn't think that deeply into the type of love that I had for my husband. So, we can all love in different ways, but to love unconditionally is a very selfless love for somebody else. And I'm sure I had felt it, for family members at certain times. And there's, I think, levels of it that I bring to a lot of my different relationships. Like, if you need my help, I'm going to try to be there. But I think at this point in my life, really the only person that I could say without condition, like if you needed a kidney tomorrow and we had a match, I would give it to you, is probably my husband. And so, sorry, family. No, like I love my family so much. And, there might be circumstances where I would do something like that for them as well. But I think it is really one of those where like you would, run and jump in front of a train if it would save them. You would risk your own life for this person. And some of you might have, differing opinions on that from me, but this is what my opinion, right? This is how I kind of see it. So, I think a lot of people tend to feel this type of love when they first become a parent. And I can't speak on that, but I asked my mom, and she was like, yes, that's correct. And so it's like, there is a lot of unconditional love in the world because you have a lot of the parent and child relationships, and especially those of you with like little kids that are still under your care, you're definitely going to have those feelings, right? Even when you're so mad at them, you're so angry, they completely, fuck up, you're still going to love them, right? And so, there is that level, but do you have that for your spouse? And that was something that I had to like really look inwards on and realize that there were aspects of my love that were getting there. Like, I gave up my career to move with my husband so that we could be together, right? But there were still other little things that I was holding on to and being kind of selfish about. So, the definition for unconditional love is affection felt for someone that is not dependent on certain qualities or actions. So, let me read that again a little bit slower. The definition says affection felt for someone that is not dependent on certain qualities or actions. So, loving without condition. And what that means is there are no terms, there could be no reciprocation, it could be thankless, and it's loving for the sake of loving. This is something that we see a lot in the parent and child relationship, especially in the like baby age or young toddler age. There's a lot of love from the parent that you're doing to take care of this little human being that's very like helpless and can't do much. And it's very thankless. They're not turning around every time you wipe their ass and being like, thanks, mom, thanks, dad. Like they're crying and throwing fits because you're trying to give them healthy food. Like there's a lot of pain that goes into trying to care for someone that age. And, then even like the teenage age and stuff like that, it's like you make rules to keep them safe and to teach them things and, let them be kids and not grow up too soon, and they reciprocate by screaming in your face. So it's really fun, right, being a parent? No, but you do all that because you love this person, and that is like, unconditional love, because you're not always going to get thank you for it. You're not always like, even when they get older, they're going to go to therapy because you fucked them up, and you're just going to continue to get blamed for all these things. I'm sorry, I'm scaring you. No. But you might not ever get a thank you, and it doesn't matter, right? Because you made this thing and you brought it into the world, and you just want the best for it, right? So I think it's easy to see that, and because it's a part of you, right? It's something that you made. It's, I think, also maybe a little bit easier to, or like just naturally, you're gonna have that. It's like built in our genetic code to love and care for this thing. Otherwise, we wouldn't become like grown adults. We wouldn't be a species, right? If we didn't care for our young. So, but then with your mates, with your husband, or your wife, whoever's watching this, or listening to this, do you have that same level of love for your spouse? And it's, extremely vulnerable to love someone that much and to love them in that way. And we see a lot of stuff in social media and within, just our media in general, TV, news, things that we read, stories and everything. Like, we see so many examples of people who are telling you that you should be upset if your love isn't reciprocated equally, that you should be upset if, your heart is broken because this person, didn't love you the same amount. And even though it's really hard to love someone on that level because it's so vulnerable, and we want to so much protect ourselves, right? We want to, have some barriers sometimes so that we're not ever put in a position where we fall on our face, sort of thing. And we try very hard for that. But I feel like when we love, you have to let all of that go. And it's very difficult. But it's something that I think is necessary in order to have like a really healthy relationship, at least in my opinion. Obviously, people have all sorts of different relationships and have all sorts of different terms and expectations and whatnot in their relationship. But I think that to love unconditionally, especially when you have these feelings of resentment and, just negative feelings towards your spouse coming in any sorts of way, it's not that you can't be angry at them and love them unconditionally, but it's that when you get to that place of understanding, you are able to like let all of that go because you're like, well, this is out of love. This is for the happiness of my spouse. Like that's all that matters, and so I have to let this go. After I was looking up unconditional love, I also looked up conditional love just to give some reference as to what's out there and just like varying levels of love and what people do. And so the thing that I kind of got from conditional love is that it's the illusion of control. When you no longer have control, you no longer love it. So some of the things that I saw were like, you want your husband or your spouse to dress a certain way. So you pick out all of their clothes and you make them look the way that you want them to look. Now, if you do this, like, that's okay, right? Like some guys, like my husband doesn't like buying his own clothes. So oftentimes during Christmas, holidays, sorts of stuff like birthdays, anytime there's like a present scenario, I will typically try to find a few new shirts for him because he just would rather someone else buy his clothes, I guess. But like if you're in the mindset of you have to look this way, and if you don't look or act this way, then I don't want to be with you, then that's not unconditional love. And so you really have to surrender yourself to who this person is, fully accepting them. I mean, it's in the vows, right? In sickness and in health, and rich and poor, and like all the yin and yangs of what we can kind of go through. We love this person and we stand by them and try to figure it out. And so I wanted to say, and I think I have this down here a little bit further, but so there is just a lot at stake there when you give yourself to somebody that way. And it's like, I feel like I have all these thoughts and feelings, and it's getting kind of hard to get them out because I don't want to make it confusing. But I think you guys probably get the idea. It's just like, and I want to say this because I don't want to make anybody feel bad, because I will say, like, when I first came across this term, I was like, well, yeah, of course I love my husband unconditionally. But as I started to really think about what all of that meant, I realized that I personally had some work to do if I wanted to have that level of love for him. And I think it's something that you also have to constantly remind yourself. It's, again, all this stuff is just so easily fleeting. You got to stay on top of it. And so for me, like, I just have to constantly remind myself of like why I'm doing things, why I chose this person to be my husband. And again, it's not in like a bad, I'm getting out sort of way, but it's just a reminder of like, I entered this marriage because this person is so sweet and kind and caring and loving and, is so proud in what he does and who he is, and like I admire all of those things. And so when I found that person and I made this promise to him to be his wife, I now have to let go of everything else, right? And so that's where this becomes the antidote to resentment, or at least my idea, as the antidote to resentment. Because depending on where your resentment comes from, and we talked about all this month, like the different ways of, in the last episode, I brought up the last few weeks' topics, because I felt like all of this stuff could kind of lead into resentment, right? So the feeling of inadequacy, maybe jealous of your partner and what they do, what they get to do, not having like meaning in your life, feeling that your partnership is uneven. So that was like, where's the line? Like, what do you do versus what they do? Like, are you asking for help? All these different things. And then, like, one that I personally relate to is giving up your dreams or your work to be the stay-at-home wife and having those feelings of resentment, and then maybe not feeling appreciated for what you do. And so, like I said, I personally sacrificed my career to move to Alabama with my husband and now live in Okinawa with my husband. And so when those thoughts of resentment started to creep up into my life, and I talked about all that last week, one thing I started to realize is that the world actually doesn't revolve around me. And that was like a really eye-opening experience. And I think I've shared this a few times with you guys, but I think it's a good thing to keep talking about, because if you haven't had this experience that the world does not revolve around you, you should do some self-reflection and get there. Because it's like, it sounds really sad, but at the same time, it's like really kind of, I guess it's just freeing, and it allows you, it kind of takes a lot of pressure off of whatever you're trying to do. So, like, for me, for instance, here I am stressing about not working in my career and feeling maybe a little bit behind in that, and like, thinking like, who's gonna hear my ideas, who's gonna, is the world ever gonna see an Alison Crowell film? Like, all these sorts of thoughts. Okay, yeah, and that sounds really self-centered, I know, but they're thoughts that I have sometimes. Because I am the gift to the world, but I'm not, right? And so realizing that, it just was like, okay, so it doesn't matter. I can continue to write. I can do whatever the hell I want. I don't have to write, even if I don't want to. Like, I can just be right now and just be the supportive wife, and that's totally okay. If that's what makes me happy, right? But what helped me kind of get there even more so was realizing that, like, what's the most important thing right now is being able to be with my husband in this, frame of, like, this time frame of his career, where it's going to take us to a bunch of different places where I can't pursue my thing, and we don't have an option not to go. Like, I have an option, but he doesn't, right? So if I want to be the loving and supporting wife, if I want to have an actual marriage with my husband, then I have to go, right? I have to do these things. And that is, once you really start to get into all of it, just realizing that, like, what I'm doing here is for love. Obviously, if I did not love this person, I wouldn't be going to this great distance for him, right? I wouldn't be traveling across the world to live with him. I would just stay in LA and try to hustle and do what I was doing before, right? So it's like, when I started realizing, like, the bigger stuff in our life that I'd already kind of, like, my unconditional love, like, stepped in and was like, this is all for love. And it's hard to explain to someone. Like, I know I have a few friends that look at me probably and are like, why do you do this? Like, you've worked so hard and now you're just a stay-at-home wife. And it's like, because of love. Had I not fallen in love with this person, I would have never done any of this stuff. But love makes you do crazy things. Love makes you put your entire world on the back burner for somebody else, because that's what you do. And it's really hard to explain and put into words. There's lots of poems and Nicholas Sparks books that try to, but it's just figuring that out, and just realizing that his happiness is my happiness. His happiness and getting to support him in what he's doing should be enough if I have unconditional love for him. So that's the next thing, is like, his happiness is the most important thing. And I say that within limits. So like if you're somebody who's in like an emotional or physical abusive scenario, you might get confused because you might love somebody but they're not a good person. And because like when I'm going into this next part, like you're making sacrifices, maybe even the love isn't reciprocated in the same way. And that's something that you kind of have to take with unconditional love, is the fact that you might love this person more than they love you. And you hope that's not true. You hope that the person equally loves you. But I'm not going to get into it too much, but just know that like an abusive or mentally abusive relationship, that's not anything that I'm talking about right now. I just want to put that out there because like if you're in a scenario where like your husband physically is hurting you, then you need help. Like you need to find someone to help you to get away from that. Mentally abusive relationships are a little harder to identify. But you shouldn't feel manipulated to love your husband or your spouse. You shouldn't feel, they shouldn't make you feel bad. So just because somebody doesn't reciprocate love the same way that you do, there is a difference between, you know, someone loving and appreciating you and showing you love in a healthy way versus somebody who's, maybe calling you names or making you feel bad on a regular basis, you walking on eggshells around them, them kind of being threatening to who you are and what you do. So if you think that maybe that is where you're at and you're listening to this and you're like, oh, it's just unconditional love. No, it's not. That is something else, and you should definitely try to find someone to help you out of that scenario. So I'm just going to end with that because I don't want to make this about an abusive relationship scenario. But I also didn't want it to get confused because I think sometimes when you're in an abusive relationship, you could maybe misconstrue some of the things that I say as something positive, and it's like, no, that person is actually not a good person and they are not deserving of your unconditional love. So anyways, but so when there is unconditional love and it's, their happiness should be, again, like with the parent-child scenario, like how excited are you for your kids in any sort of scenario that they have, right? So I think you should be able to feel that for somebody that you didn't give birth to or that isn't, your spawn. You should be able to feel that for your spouse as well. And so, if my sacrifice is what's making him happy, then okay, like I need to be on board with that. And again, like I can't necessarily expect the same in return. So I really hope one day that, when we're trying to figure out what we're going to do after the Marine Corps, if going back to LA or going somewhere for me to try my career again is an option, like I hope my husband will 100% be supportive of that. But at the same time, like I'm not doing all of this today thinking that tomorrow he's going to do the same for me. And I think at first I was. Doing this thinking that one day, when he has the opportunity, he'll do all of this for me as well. But now I don't think that, and I wouldn't want him to, because then it kind of takes away like what I'm doing here. When I have the thought that like, oh, this will be reciprocated, like then it's kind of it's not unconditional love anymore, right? So I think that for me, getting to this place, it's just been really important in my development of working through some of those, hard feelings that I was having, and like feelings about myself as well. Because I think, again, and I kind of talked about this last week, like resentment is really just a reflection of like what's not going right in our world, and it's more on us than on somebody else. And so just coming to terms with like, this might not ever be reciprocated, this might just be a one-sided thing, is actually okay. And in a way, it's really kind of freeing feeling this way. And I say that a lot, but when you come to certain ideas in your head and certain understandings, and you let go of so many other things, right? You let go of what people think about you, when you let go of expectations, when you let go of conditions, feeling that like I'll do this if you do this for me. When you let those things go and you just act with with a genuine nature, and you approach things from a genuine place, because that's what you want to do, it feels so much better than constantly thinking, okay, if I love my husband and I make his lunch for him today, then he's going to take us out for dinner tonight. Like that's super small, but those are like little things that people might do. And, if you want your husband like to have a healthy meal for lunch, then just out of the love of your heart, like make him a healthy meal. If that's not something that you care about, then don't do it, right? So I think it's just like, it just helps be really freeing, because then there's just not like, there's not all these other outside pressures or societal feelings that enter into this relationship. It kind of puts you in a little unconditional love bubble because no one can touch that. It doesn't matter what anybody says, it doesn't matter what happens. Again, like you might get upset, you might get frustrated, you can get angry at your spouse. All those things are okay, but when you know that that love is there, then it's really hard for anything else to penetrate it. And you know that whatever you have come your way, you're able to get through it, right? All right, I'm going to wrap it up here. I just want to say a few more things to just kind of like clear everything up. So when I first, again, started kind of exploring the more unconditional love and like really getting into where my, what I was doing, what I wasn't doing, and like seeing that I wasn't fully loving my husband unconditionally, I realized how scary that is, because like I said earlier, you become so vulnerable in that position. And I think people have a really hard time with that, because so many of us, and I am one, love to control things. And it's really hard letting go of control. And I've been talking about this for like a year now on here, about how we can't control anything. The only thing that we can control is our emotions, our thoughts, and our feelings. Like anything that's internal within us, we can control. Anything that's external, we can't. So it's weird, because there's parts of this that I've known for a really long time, and I've like thought, and I think I've probably even talked about. But then there's other parts of it that it's like knowing it and talking about, and then like really living and feeling it are two different things. And so I just realized like the level of control I have, in theory, I hope my husband loves me as much as I do. And I think he probably does. But at this point, that doesn't even matter anymore, right? Because whatever sort of love he has for me, we're still in the relationship. If for some reason he wakes up one day and he doesn't feel that way, then there's nothing I can do about it, right? All I can do is then in that moment control my reactions, control my emotions, and like deal with things, right? Just deal with the fact that like, okay, like he's not into me anymore. But for me, like, as long as I still have that love for him, and we're still, and I think unconditional love helps you keep the love, because when marriages in life have so many ups and downs, right? You're going to come into so many different scenarios. And so there are going to be times where you might not be getting what you need from your partner. There may be times when, you guys are spread thin in what you're doing on a daily basis. You got a lot going on. It's hard to get time to connect with each other. Even just us moving here, like the last 3 years, he had a hard duty, but at least I got to sleep next to him most nights. But now, like, he's been gone for several months already, and he's going to be gone for another several months. And so it's like, these aren't easy things in a marriage to deal with. But when you have unconditional love, and when you approach, every scenario with that in mind, it makes it so much easier, because you are letting go of the control. You're letting go of this idea that you can control what the outcome is. And instead, like I said before, you're just approaching each scenario with genuine feelings and, doing your best that you can from it. And another thing I wanted to say was like, your spouse might ask you to do things that like you don't want to do. So again, like with the lunch scenario, like maybe your husband's like, hey, I really would love for you to make me a healthy meal every day, and you don't want to. So before I was like, don't do it if you don't want to. But that's if, he's not bringing it up to you. If he's bringing it up to you that, hey, this is something I would really love for you to do, if you have time, like, do that for them. If you don't have time, obviously we are humans. We're not going to be 100% perfect in every single little thing that we do. But like, again, if it leads to the happiness of your spouse, why wouldn't you do it? And that's where I think we see the resentment, is because we have these little feelings that creep in. Well, I'm not going to make your lunch because you don't like going out to date nights on Saturday. Okay, well, we can't control the fact that this person doesn't want to go out on date nights. We can control that we're going to decide not to be upset by it. And that's where these things are really hard, because some of you might be thinking to yourself, like, well, if they're not enjoying the same things, then maybe they're not in a loving relationship. And that's where you could take it. And it's like, that's where my head kind of starts swirling, because it's like, yeah, like there's all these like levels of love. But I'm talking about you guys today having these feelings, wanting to better yourself as a person. Now, this might not be it for you. I'm just saying this is what works for me. And when I sit down and when I think and I have these like philosophical reflections and thoughts with myself, these are the things that kind of bring me peace. And when I work on them and when I'm actually practicing them, I am living a much happier life. I'm not caught up in what's owed to me. I'm not caught up in hateful or bitter feelings towards my spouse. I'm not caught up into those things, because I'm approaching everything with, a genuine nature, instead of like, I'm going to get something out of this. And so I think it's just an interesting idea and something that you guys should try. If you're struggling with any of these sorts of things, I'm sure there's a lot to this. A lot of these ideas I get from my personal life and things that I'm going through. So, I just hope that this is inspiring to whatever sort of scenario that you might be going through, if it's relatable in any sort of way. Because I do, like, when I read about unconditional love, and it's been several months now, and it's still something that has really stuck with me. And I just don't think it's talked about in this sort of way. Like, we hear it, and a lot of times we hear it more sorts with like a parent-child scenario. We don't really hear it talked about with spouses very often. And sometimes, in our society, it even looks down on this type of love, because, you don't want to get used. Like, you need to stick up for yourself. Like, there's all sorts of things out there, especially I see like in the sort of social media pages that are kind of geared maybe towards more single people. It's like, you put up such a barrier. How can you allow somebody to come into your life and love you when you're telling them that you're not going to love them at all? When it's all about you, you're not ready for a serious relationship. So if you're listening to this, I assume you're a housewife or a married person or house husband or whatever, stay-at-home dad, stay-at-home mom. So you've already entered that stage of commitment with somebody that, we know we're supposed to give our whole heart to, right? But doing that, or saying that and doing that, are two different things. And so I think that, we kind of harden when we start keeping score, when we start, expecting things from our spouse, and instead of just loving them for the person that we married, right? So, anyways, okay. I might have to do another one on unconditional love at some point, because this was kind of fun to talk about. But And I think it should continue to be talking about, because I think there's just so much other negative stuff out there. I think we need a little bit more light and a little bit more love, right? We need to talk more about this stuff so people know that it's okay to love someone that way. It's okay to like be that vulnerable. And you should be. That's what great love stories are built on, right? It's vulnerability. You don't have Shakespeare without this level of love. Okay. You don't have Nicholas Sparks without this level of love. Okay. You definitely do not have The Notebook without this. Without this level of love. Okay. So, anyways. All right. If you guys have been enjoying these episodes, please comment, subscribe, let me know what you're thinking. I would love to do more housewife topics, so if you guys have some, please send them my way. And yeah, we're going to try to get into a little bit more philosophy again next month, but I have to still figure out the topics, so it'll be a surprise even to me. But yes, please go and check out the link. Check out my website, social media pages, all that fun stuff. Anyways, thank you guys so much for joining me for another episode. I hope you have a great rest of your week. And cheers. I'll see you soon.